To escape his girlfriend's 9 times a day quality time schedule, Hakan, a skinny survivor who already looked emotionally and physically cooked, fled to the ocean on a luxury bamboo raft with just a backpack and a few fishing tools. Nobody knows how long he had been floating out there, but when he finally opened his eyes, this man realized he had somehow washed up on a deserted island. First, Hakan dragged his bamboo raft onto the beach, then ran along the shoreline yelling into the open air, probably just making sure his girlfriend could not still hear him from home. After a while, there was no answer, no angry voice, no "babe, where are you?" carried by the wind, so our island escape artist knew he was safe. He dropped onto the sand beside the raft with a smug little smile, looking way too relaxed for a man who might be stranded, but hey, peace is peace. But freedom does not come with snacks, and his stomach quickly reminded him that emotional recovery still needs calories. So Hakan got up, put on his backpack, grabbed his spear gun, and walked along the beach to see what this island had on the menu. Soon, he found an abandoned boat, which was basically a free survival upgrade, so he left his gear there and kept searching for food. Then he spotted a few dry coconuts, picked them up, and gave them the classic shake test, hoping for water, luck, or at least one tiny miracle. Sadly, they were dry, but Hakan still kept them because the coconut husk could be used to start a fire, and in survival mode, even disappointment has a job. He brought them back to the boat, then noticed a coconut tree nearby and found a small coconut under it, along with a dried pandanus fruit. This time, when he shook the coconut, it actually sounded like there was still water inside, so suddenly, this little coconut became the MVP of the beach. After that, Hakan opened his backpack and checked what he had brought during his dramatic escape from home. Inside were only a few things: a magnifying glass, an axe, 2 small knives, and some diving gear. Not exactly a survival warehouse, but for a man who escaped on a bamboo raft, honestly, not bad. Then he pulled out a hoodie from the bag and realized it was completely wet. He gave it one brave sniff, instantly regretted it, and hung it on the boat to dry. Hakan cracked open the coconut and took one precious sip of coconut water, like he had just unlocked the premium drink menu on Broke Boy Island. He pulled out his knife, tried to scrape out some coconut meat, and only got a tiny piece about the size of a grain of rice. The coconut was clearly too young, too empty, and honestly not ready for this survival relationship, so he tossed it aside and moved on. At one point, he noticed a chameleon chilling on the boat, looking like it had accidentally joined the survival episode without signing the waiver. Hakan was hungry, but apparently not desperate enough to turn this tiny color-changing roommate into lunch, so he chose mercy and let it live another day. With the snack situation looking tragic, our island escape artist went off to collect some dry bamboo sticks for a shelter. He spotted a backpack half buried in the sand, got excited for about 3 seconds, dumped it out, and found nothing but sand. No food, no tools, no miracle, just premium beach disappointment, so he threw it away and kept searching. Around the shore, more dry bamboo pieces had washed up, and Hakan gathered them like a man building a house with whatever the ocean felt like donating. Back at the abandoned boat, he studied the stern and realized it could be turned into a decent little sleeping spot. Honestly, not a bad idea for someone whose original plan was float away and hope for peace. He fitted the wooden boards together to make the floor flatter, used his axe to trim the rough edges, and adjusted everything until the pieces sat properly. With the floor handled, Hakan raised the bamboo sticks into a roof frame and tied them down with rope, slowly turning the back of this old boat into a tiny beachfront survival suite. Nearby, he found a few short coconut trees, chopped down several palm fronds with his knife, and carried them back once he had enough. Some leaves went on top as roofing, while the rest became bedding for the floor. Not exactly 5-star comfort, but definitely better than sleeping on sand like a retired crab. Now that his island bedroom was settled, Hakan grabbed a sharp spear and went hunting. Before long, he stabbed a flounder and carried it onto the beach. The fish started thrashing around, desperately trying to escape, but Hakan just smiled like a low-budget seafood villain, basically saying, "Where do you think you're going, buddy?" Back at the boat, he took off his shirt, changed into his diving gear, grabbed his fins and spear gun, and headed into the ocean for round 2. Underwater, all he saw were coral reefs and tiny fish swimming around like they knew they were too small to be worth the effort. Hakan ignored them with the face of a man plotting a bigger meal, because apparently our skinny castaway had standards now. Suddenly, he ran into a sea turtle, and the moment the turtle saw him, it took off like it had unpaid rent. After a long search with no decent target, Hakan finally aimed at a school of tiny fish, fired one desperate shot, and completely missed. Beautiful confidence, terrible execution. His second shot went a little better. Somehow, he hit a small emperor angelfish, and even though it was not exactly a feast, one tiny fish was still better than catching absolutely nothing and arguing with the ocean. He reloaded the spear gun and kept swimming, still hoping for something bigger. Soon enough, the same sea turtle showed up again, but this time, it had 2 uninvited passengers on its back, a pair of remores freeloading like they had a lifetime turtle Uber subscription. Hakan ignored them and moved on. A little farther out, he found a bunch of sea urchins, but that was an immediate no. Hold them wrong, and your hand suffers. Eat them wrong, and your mouth starts a lawsuit. So Hakan wisely decided not to turn lunch into a medical emergency. Right when his patience was already running thin, the sea turtle passed by again, looking way too calm, almost like it was personally mocking him for still not catching anything impressive. Even the tiny fish seemed to be swimming around with disrespectful little attitudes. At this point, Hakan had enough. Hungry, annoyed, and tired of being judged by the entire reef community, he fired one random angry shot, and by pure dumb luck, the spear nailed an unlucky Titan triggerfish. Finally, the ocean stopped laughing for 5 seconds. Feeling way too proud of himself, Hakan brought his hard-earned trophy back to shore and immediately started inspecting the Titan triggerfish like he was reviewing seafood on a survival cooking show. He poked its body with one finger, probably checking if the meat was firm, while the fish stared back with those weirdly seductive lips, crooked teeth, and the tragic look of someone who got arrested before making it to the orthodontist. Not satisfied with the visual inspection, Hakan grabbed a tiny stick and poked it straight between the fish's teeth to test how sharp they were, because apparently this man needed a full dental report before dinner. When he tilted the fish up, its mouth opened wide like it was screaming, "Somebody help me, please." After playing around with it for a bit, Hakan lifted the fish with both hands in front of the camera, proudly showing off his catch, like he was trying to tease his girlfriend through the screen. With the Titan triggerfish, the small emperor angelfish, and 2 flounders secured, Hakan headed back to camp. He dragged over 2 large pieces of wood to prepare his beachside grill setup, then started cleaning the 2 flounders first. He peeled off the skin, revealing the smooth white fillets underneath, which looked fresh, clean, and honestly a little painful to watch if you still had any sympathy left for the fish. For the fire, he broke a few dry pine twigs and placed them between the 2 logs. Then he pulled out his tiny magnifying glass, aimed it under the sun, and focused the light onto a piece of dry coconut fiber. A few seconds later came the dramatic campfire lung workout. Hakan leaned in, puffed his cheeks, and blew into the smoking fiber like his dinner depended on it, because it literally did. White smoke rose, the flame finally caught, and he quickly added more dry pine branches to keep it alive. While waiting for the coals to glow, he pulled out the emperor angelfish and started scraping off its scales, basically giving it the roughest beauty treatment of its short little life. Once the fire was ready, he laid several sticks across the 2 logs to make a simple grill, then placed the 2 flounders and the emperor angelfish on top to cook. By now, the sky was getting dark, and Hakan still had one big problem left, the Titan triggerfish. So he dug a hole in the sand, placed the fish inside, and buried it like he was hiding treasure from island pirates. To make sure he would not forget the exact spot tomorrow, this genius planted a short dry bamboo stick right at the head of the sand mound. And honestly, the whole thing looked less like food storage and more like a tiny cursed fish grave in the middle of nowhere. After finishing this overly dramatic burial ceremony, night fell over the island, and our survival professor turned on a rechargeable camping lantern. Because even wild men apparently enjoy a little mood lighting. Right on time, the grilled fish were cooked, so Hakan gathered his smoky little dinner, climbed back into the shelter, and started his primitive island feast in the dark. After eating until his soul came back online, he stretched out on the boat floor, relaxed, full, and way too comfortable for someone sleeping inside an abandoned boat on a deserted island. Then drifted off into a solid night's sleep. The next morning, Hakan woke up looking completely wiped out, grabbed the old coconut, tilted his head back, and tried to drink what was left. Too bad, the coconut was already out of water, giving him only a few pathetic drops like it was mocking him personally. Annoyed by the empty coconut, Hakan grabbed his axe and walked deeper into the trees. He looked up at the towering coconut palms with pure helplessness, staring at his life-changing upgrade hanging way too far out of reach. But he refused to quit. He found a large piece of driftwood on the beach, dragged it back, leaned it against the coconut tree as a sketchy launch pad, climbed up, and hacked at the stems until a few coconuts finally dropped. Then he hugged the whole juicy bunch and carried it back to camp like he had just won the island lottery. Back at the shelter, he used the axe to shave off the husk, cracked open the top, and started chugging like a man who had been personally bullied by dehydration. Coconut water poured down his beard and chin like a tiny waterfall. His stomach got a little, but his tank top got most of the shower. And while drinking, Hakan gave the camera a satisfied, slightly evil smile, like he had just unlocked peace, water, and a few more girlfriend-free hours. After that, he went to war with the coconut, chopping hard until it split in half. Then he used his small knife to carefully pry out chunks of coconut meat, eating them piece by piece like this sad island breakfast was suddenly gourmet. Once he had eaten enough, Hakan wandered toward the ocean with a goofy walk, then dropped himself into the water to cool off and enjoy that rare peaceful feeling of relaxing without his girlfriend nearby. Back on shore, he squeezed his shirt with everything he had, wringing out seawater, coconut water, and the last bit of dignity from that poor tank top. Since a nasty gust of wind had blown through his shelter last night while he was sleeping, almost wiping out his signature beard, Hakan decided to collect more bamboo and build a wall to protect his beauty. He lined the bamboo sticks on the boat and tied them tightly to the wooden frame with rope. Stepping back to admire the result, this man looked at his ragged bamboo and palm shelter with the confidence of someone staring at a 5-star beachfront resort. But the bamboo wall was not enough, so he gathered more palm leaves and wove them through the gaps, sealing the wall until the wind could no longer walk in like it owned the place. To upgrade the entrance of his 5-star resort, Hakan placed 2 bamboo poles, carefully cut shorter bamboo pieces, and tied the crossbars tightly with rope to build a small ladder. Then he tiptoed onto it to test the weight, trying to look calm and stylish like a catwalk model, while both hands were still glued to the side of the old boat. Because deep down, he knew this survival trap could betray him at any second. After surviving his questionable ladder test, Hakan sat down in the middle of the sand and started scraping dry coconut fibers with the tip of his knife. He pulled out the magnifying glass again, aimed the sunlight onto the dry fibers, and began his little beachside magic trick. Then came the dramatic part. Hakan puffed his cheeks, widened his eyes, and used his dragon breath to blow into the coconut fibers until thick white smoke started rising. A few seconds later, the fibers caught fire. But of course, because peace was never really an option, he accidentally touched the flame, snapped his hand back in pain, and quickly threw in a few dry sticks to keep the fire alive. Once the fire was going, he used the axe to carve a coconut shell, grabbed a handful of coffee grounds he had somehow brought from home, dropped them in, and placed the shell right beside the glowing coals to boil. While waiting for his wild little coffee pot to heat up, Hakan spotted a few plastic bottles washed up near the bushes and picked them up for another survival experiment. He carried them back, sat on the sand, and used his machete to cut the bottles in half. Then he took one half to the sea, scooped up some seawater, placed it back on the sand, and covered it with the other half to create a tiny freshwater distillation setup. Not exactly a high-tech water factory, but for a man living inside an abandoned boat, the effort deserves at least one slow clap. By then, the coffee was boiling, so Hakan used 2 sticks to lift the coconut shell back to the shelter, then stirred it with a pine twig like a true wilderness aristocrat. Using a green leaf to protect his hand from the heat, he slowly poured the pitch-black coffee into a metal cup, ready for one peaceful sip like he was at a 5-star jungle cafe. But before the cup even touched his lips, he spotted a fish fin cutting across the water. Hakan jumped up and rushed toward it, but he was too slow, and the fish disappeared like it had seen his hunting resume. So he walked back to the shelter, took one sad sip of coffee, and swallowed it with the bitter taste of missed opportunity. Once the coffee kicked in, this man was suddenly fired up for revenge. He grabbed his gear, marched back into the ocean, and dove over the coral reef, only to find tiny fish swimming around like useless little background extras. Diving deeper, he spotted a spiky sea cucumber on the seafloor. Without hesitation, he stabbed it with his knife and split it open with both hands. The inside was pitch black and suspicious, instantly reminding him of his girlfriend's little clam back home. Bro got haunted on the spot, tossed it to the baby fish, and made a hard U-turn to find a less personal target. A little later, he aimed his spear gun at a fish and pulled the trigger with full confidence, but the water was too cloudy, so the shot missed completely. Lesson learned. On the second try, Hakan fired fast and finally nailed a trevally, saving at least one tiny piece of his hunter reputation. He kept diving, hoping to find something better, but this time, luck had already clocked out. With no more decent prey in sight, Hakan slowly headed back to shore, carrying his gear and one lonely trevally, wearing the face of a man who came for ocean revenge but got served seafood disappointment instead. He set the trevally down, then turned to yesterday's Titan triggerfish grave, and started digging up the body like this had suddenly become a seafood crime scene. He carried it to the ocean, washed off all the sand, and got ready to gut it, dealing with that wild fish inside smell that was absolutely not giving fine dining. Once it was cleaned, Hakan dragged the whole Titan triggerfish back to camp and slapped it straight onto the blazing coals, cooking it in the most aggressively primitive way possible. For the trevally, he washed a coconut palm stalk, used it as a simple grill, and placed the fish on top. By then, one side of the Titan triggerfish had already turned completely black, so he flipped it over and let the other side suffer too. As evening came in, Hakan stood up, turned on his camping lantern, and scooped out a quick piece of coconut meat to snack on while waiting for the fish to finish. Finally, the Titan triggerfish was cooked. He brought it up to the shelter, took a few bites, and instantly realized it had a funky smell. Our guy closed his eyes, forced himself to chew, and sat there with the face of a man serving his own punishment. He could barely swallow it, but throwing it away felt too painful, because wasting food on a deserted island is basically emotional bankruptcy. After losing that battle with the tragic triggerfish flavor, he immediately switched targets to the trevally. In just a few bites, he cleaned it completely, leaving nothing in his hand but the dry little skeleton. The problem was, the trevally was too small. It barely counted as dinner, barely even got stuck in his teeth, and that night Hakan lay there with one arm over his forehead, unable to sleep because his stomach was still throwing a full protest. Annoyed by the hunger, he straight up turned off the camping lantern and let the darkness swallow the whole shelter, hoping sleep would shut his belly up for a few hours. The next morning, Hakan opened his eyes with that blank one brain cell face and crawled out of his luxury boat bed. He walked over and tapped the plastic bottle distillation setup, where tiny drops of fresh water had finally condensed inside. He tilted it back for a satisfying drink, but the excitement died instantly. All 3 plastic bottles combined had produced only a few pathetic drops, not even enough to make his throat feel included. Out of better options, Hakan grabbed the last coconut he had saved in the shelter and started working on it. He tilted his head back for a sad little drink, but once again, more coconut water ran down his face than actually went into his mouth. After finishing the water, he peeled out pieces of coconut meat and munched on them for a quick energy refill. And apparently, once his body got a little fuel, our island boy started feeling dangerous. He grabbed his knife, sharpened a bamboo stick into a spear, and placed a foam board on the deck as a target. Stepping back a few feet for momentum, Hakan began his dramatic kung fu spear throwing training arc. The confidence was sky high, but the skill was still somewhere underwater. His first throw flew straight into nothing and missed the target completely. Not giving up, he picked up the spear and threw again. Second throw, missed. Third throw, still missed. For the final throw, Hakan gathered all his power and sent the spear straight into the edge of the foam board. Not the center, not even close, but good enough. Congratulations. Our man had officially graduated from the Island Spear Throwing Academy. He returned to his little cage, ripped off his tank top, put on his gear, and got ready to test his freshly graduated spear skills in the ocean. But before he even touched the water, he got too excited and started spinning the spear around like a budget kung fu master. And of course, because this is Hakan, he awkwardly smacked the spear right into his own leg. Hakan jumped into the ocean with that blank one brain cell face, but somehow, his eyes were full of murder mode. He looked left, looked right, and started hunting for a target like the entire reef owed him rent. Carrying his spear around like a certified ocean menace, he first poked a sleepy sea urchin for absolutely no reason, because apparently even underwater creatures could not nap in peace around this man. Once he got bored, he switched to messing with a blue starfish, grabbing it off the coral like it had personally offended him. Hakan kept crawling and swimming through every little corner of the reef, but the ocean looked painfully empty. Not a single decent fish showed up to become a punching bag for his newly graduated spear fu skills. Back on shore, he kept walking while practicing his fancy spear spinning wrist moves, because confidence was still alive, even if accuracy was barely breathing. Then suddenly, he spotted a flounder. No hesitation. Hakan locked in, launched the spear, and nailed it clean through. Just like that, the long comedy streak of missing everything finally ended. He came back to shore with a tasty flounder in hand, then brutally tossed the blue starfish back into the water and waved goodbye like, "Class dismissed, sweetheart. I've got real food now." After days away from his girlfriend, Hakan was clearly starting to lose his mind, so he started dragging the bamboo raft back onto the shore with full desperate energy. He found a few more bamboo sticks, cut them to match the raft's length, and tied everything together with rope to repair and widen his floating escape machine. Once the raft upgrade was finished, he pushed it into the water, climbed on, and paddled around with his hands to test the balance and weight capacity. After the test, he brought his open-top bamboo super yacht back to shore. Before saying goodbye to the deserted island and heading back to his girlfriend, Hakan had one final island mission: eat something that did not taste like regret. He started a fire and blew into it with full caveman confidence, only for the smoke to blast straight into the sky like his dinner was trying to call for help. While waiting for the coals to glow, Hakan chopped a coconut palm stalk, split it open, and turned it into a rough little grill. Then he cleaned the flounder, rinsed it off like a budget beach chef, brought it back, and laid it on the palm stalk grill. A little later, one side had turned golden, so he used his knife and a small stick to flip it over and cook the other side evenly. Before long, the fish was done. Hakan set it on the front of the boat, used his knife to cut into the soft white meat, and devoured it like a man who had been personally bullied by hunger for 3 straight days. By the time he finished the flounder, night had fallen. He climbed back into the shelter, rested for the evening, and prepared his mind for tomorrow's ocean crossing. The next morning, Hakan popped his head up from under the deck with the most suspiciously clueless face ever, and honestly, nobody knows what weird little side quest he was doing down there last night. You guys can guess that one. After crawling out, Hakan stood there for a second like he was still mentally buffering from whatever happened under the deck, then grabbed a bamboo stick and wrote "help me" in huge letters across the sand. Then he lay down beside it, waiting for a miracle from the sky, or at least a kind-hearted female pilot to fly by and rescue this sun-baked disaster. But after lying there all morning with no hero, no plane, and no beautiful rescue angel in sight, Hakan finally sat up, bitter but realistic. He packed his things, gathered every tool, snack, and questionable life decision he had left, then carried everything to the bamboo super yacht. And of course, he didn't forget to go back for his spear gun and fins, because apparently even a sketchy bamboo escape still needed full seafood war equipment. After that, he dragged the raft out toward the water. If nobody was coming to save him, then our island wizard would have to save himself. But will this homemade bamboo machine actually carry him back to land, or is Hakan about to unlock a brand new chaotic disaster arc in the middle of the ocean? Follow along, because in the next episode, we'll find out whether this man escapes the island, or simply upgrades from survival mode to ocean clown mode.